Alright, what is up, fantasy fans? As always, I'm Shay from the channel Zachary Shay, narrator of The Gallant by Janny Wirtz, and today I wanted to talk about 10 liminal, is the phrase I'm using to describe these, but these are 10 books, 10 fantasy series, fantasy books that take place in our world, but with magical elements just beyond the veil. I, like many fantasy readers my age, grew up on Harry Potter, this belief that this young boy who lived beneath the stairs was able to discover this magical world that existed just beyond the horizon of the world we know. Some have phrased this urban fantasy. I just feel like urban fantasy doesn't necessarily encapsulate what I'm trying to say here. It basically fantasy books that take place just beyond the veil. Think Harry Potter, think Dresden Files. There are also a ton of, I also thought of phrasing it like earth-based fantasy books that take place on our earth, but then, you get into a weird place, like Broken Empire by Mark Lawrence is our earth but far-flung future. Even Tolkien, his world is supposed to be not otherworldly. Middle Earth is a far-flung past our earth. And then you get into like historical fantasy like Between Two Fires by Buhlman, which is fantastic. But mainly here I'm going to be trying to recommend books that take place in our world that have magic just beyond the reader's grasp. And with no further ado, I'm going to get into number 10 on the list, and that is Lock and Key by Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez. No, you can't understand because you are reading the last chapter of something without having read the first chapter. Young people always think they're coming into a story at the beginning when they're usually coming in at the end. All right, so Lock and Key, it's a comic book by the son of Stephen King. It is an incredibly inventive, beautifully told story about the Locke family as they come to Key House, which is a house in a town called Lovecraft. Very on the nose, yes. And there are all these magical keys that exist just beyond the world we see. And in this world, it's like only children can actually see the effects of the keys. The keys can harm adults. The magic is real. The power that these keys exerts is real for everyone, but the perception is limited only to young children or anyone below the age of 18. And there's a reason for that is expounded upon later in these books. But we follow the Key family, and oh man, it is a beautiful story about family, about generational trauma. It is probably, it's my second favorite work to come out of the King family as a whole. I like it better than almost every Stephen King book. It is one of my favorite comics I've ever read. Definitely my favorite horror comic I've ever read. It is just beautiful. It may not be my favorite horror comic I've ever read. Stay tuned. But it's just a beautifully told story. So imaginative, so wonderful. Really, it's just a beautiful blend of fantastical and horrific, and I highly recommend you check it out. And number 9 on my list is the book/series most likely to move higher up on this list as time goes on, and that is Paternus, Rise of the Gods. Well, book 1 is Rise of the Gods. The series is Paternus by Dirk Ashton. Far above the thin skin of atmosphere that shields the earth like a blanket protects a child from unknown terrors of night, the moon keeps its eternal watch in the cold silence of space. Through cloud, rain, and fog, roof, rock, sea, and stone, the moon sees, and the moon knows. So this book is actually what prompted me to make this video, and even though it's sitting at number 9, I can very easily, if the quality persists and doesn't go down in the next 2 installments, this will easily be top 5. I adored this first book. I thought it was magnificent. This imagines a lot of Greek myth, Norse myth, Egyptian, everything, whatever you can possibly think of, folklore, Arthurian legend, Christianity, Islam, Hindu, and imagines it as one continuous mythology. All these different godlike figures that we as human beings have heard about in our histories and in our folklore, they're all the children of this one creature, father, and they are what's called firstborn, and they all have godlike abilities. And we follow the character of Fee as she starts to unravel some of the mysteries around these different firstborn. Beautiful story, really fun. The prose is tight and engaging. It reminds me of Neil Gaiman's American Gods mixed with the kind of Americana of a Stephen King novel. Very atypical for a self-pub fantasy novel. The prose is tight. The dialogue is great. It's very multi-perspective, a lot of perspective. Sometimes perspective hops within a page. But much like Steven Erikson, Dirk Ashton is really adept at imbuing a lot of characterization in a fairly short page count, like in very little words. He's able to imbue a lot of characterization, so it actually doesn't suffer from that multi-POV in the slightest. It's a really, really good book, and it is exactly what I'm talking about when I say magic just beyond the veil of what we see. All right, and so at number 8 I have It by Stephen King. Maybe there aren't any such things as good friends or bad friends. Maybe there are just friends, people who stand by you when you're hurt and who help you feel not so lonely. Maybe they're always worth being scared for, and hoping for, and living for. Maybe worth dying for too, if that's what has to be. No good friends, no bad friends. Only people you want, need to be with. People who build their houses in your heart. So this is my favorite King novel. I said earlier Lock and Key was my second favorite work to come out of the King family. And now it was my first favorite until I read this magnum opus right here. I know this novel has come under a lot of scrutiny for this very infamous scene, and every single ounce of scrutiny it's received, it's absolutely deserved. It's at the 98% mark, and you can see where it's coming, and I highly recommend anyone who's curious about this book but wants to completely skip that. Once you get to that chapter, just skip it. It's completely extractable. It's not necessary. I don't know why Stephen King hasn't taken it out yet. But that scene aside, this is a beautiful story about growing up, about friendship, about a battle between Atuin the World Turtle and the evil entity that the town of Derry has been built around. It's eldritch horror. It's reminiscent of Tolkien in a lot of ways. You follow this fellowship, the Losers Club, as they set out on this journey to stop this primordial evil. And every single character in this book is perfectly characterized. If you've seen the movie and you think you know this story, you don't know this story. The characters have so much more to them than they do in the films. And I didn't even dislike the films, but this book is, without a doubt, like one of the best written books I've ever read. If it wasn't for that infamous scene, it would be like top 10 books I've ever read in my entire life. It is just a magnificent piece of horror and fantasy, and I adored it. So we're going to pivot a little bit from that coming of age type story to Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is my number 7. That was what magic did. It revealed the heart of who you'd been before life took away your belief in the possible. It gave back the world all lonely children longed for. So, Ninth House is a dark academia, and it follows the character of Galaxy Stern as she is attending Yale University. Within Yale University, there are these 9 hidden societies. Well, really 8 hidden societies that full of a bunch of like ensorcelled Nepo babies that are using different magics and different types of sorcery to basically for their own gain. And there's one house that keeps them in check, the Ninth House. And Galaxy Stern is not the typical Ninth House student. Most of these students, like her mentor Darlington, are the best and the brightest who have devoted themselves to the understanding of the paranormal. Alex is a little bit different. She was recruited for her abilities that you'll discover more about if you read it, but basically it comes down to she's able to see ghosts in color, and most people cannot see ghosts at all, and only through taking this potion that could potentially be lethal each time you take it are they able to see shades in black and white. But Alex is able to see them in color and may even be able to interact with them. And you follow her as she tries to keep these houses in check, and she really doesn't understand the world she's been thrust into. But man, is it a dark and magical world. Really, really, really loved it. I think you should check it out. It's great. In my number 6 spot, I have the book that most people probably expect to be number 1. It is, in my opinion, the most famous, well-known urban fantasy that gets talked about these days, at least that I see. And that is The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher. My name is Harry Blackstone Copperfield Dresden. Conjure by it at your own risk. When things get strange, when what goes bump in the night flicks on the lights, when no one else can help you, give me a call. I'm in the book. So I have a somewhat turbulent relationship with Dresden Files. The first 11 or so books I adored. Like, I thought this was going to be a top 10 series of all time. And there's this narrative on BookTube that the books start out really pervy, but they get better as time goes on. I have not found it to be thus. I've actually found it to be the opposite. In the earlier books, a lot of like Dresden's comments were admissible because, like, you know, he's young and he's hitting on girls his own age and he's looking at their boobs, and it's like, you know, he's a guy and he's looking at girls. But as we get into changes and further on, it's like, okay, now you're pushing 40 and you're looking at an 18-year-old's chest, and it just got very uncomfortable for me. I still, each time a book comes out, I question if I want to read it. But I mean, he has droves and droves of very, very passionate fans, very passionate female fans that have no issue with this. So it could just be me, but I'm like, why are we ogling an 18-year-old girl and we're 40? I do not understand. Super gross. And just a lot of the jokes in here are just, the fact that it's still at number 6 on this list just shows how strong the fantastical elements are. They are really well done here, and I hate that this series has some of this weird stuff in here, because a lot of what it's doing as a our world fantasy, as a fantasy set within our Earth, modern day, is not something I see done most anywhere else, and it you know, it really sucks that this series has to be tinged with this weirdness. But I do still love the series. I'm able to look past a lot of its flaws. It's just sometimes it can be very grating. It's not a series I can binge read because of these things. And then a series that I think is able to hit on a lot of the greatness of Dresden Files without having that weird sexual stuff. And it is one of my favorite comic series of all time, and that is Hellboy by Mike Mignola. No rain, but thunder and the sound of giants. But if there must be an end, let it be loud, let it be bloody. Better to burn than to wither away in the dark. The Hellboy universe, it goes on to include BPRD, Sir Edward Grey Witchfinder, Lobster Johnson, Abe Sapien. There's so many stories within the Hellboy universe that expand on the lore presented here. You have everything from Rasputin, who murdered the Russian family. You have Baba Yaga. You have King Arthur. You have everything. You have Mab of the Fae. You have Morgan Le Fay. You just have so many different folklore characters, Cthulhu, all sorts of stuff in here. The Arthurian legends actually feature very prominently. The Wild Hunt, all of this features in this story, and oh man, it's so magical. It's so heroic. I love the character of Hellboy. He is not of our world, and yet he does everything he can to protect those that are from our world. And even when they hate and fear him, he always does his best to protect the little guy. And I especially have a soft spot for, you know, characters that look horrific but actually have a very, very soft heart. And Hellboy is the prime example of this. He's just a good Catholic boy that wants to save people. He has a little bit of a drinking problem and he smokes some cigars, but he's got a very soft center. And I adore this series. I think anyone who has any interest in urban fantasy, our world fantasy, folklore should check out Hellboy by Mike Mignola. All right, next up in my number 4 spot, I have kind of a cheat answer here, and it is the fantasy side of the DC Comics universe. Maybe the world has run out of room for monsters, or maybe they're just getting harder to recognize. Do we immerse ourselves in fictional horror as a way of numbing our emotions to its real-life counterpart? It's raining in Washington tonight. Plump, warm summer rain that covers the sidewalks with leopard spots. Downtown, elderly ladies carry their houseplants out to set them on the fire escapes, as if they were infirm relatives or boy kings. I like that. Please don't go. It's lonely. There's a hole in my head as big as the world. And it's so very lonely. So when I say the fantasy side of the DC Comics universe, I mean Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. I mean Sandman by He Who Shall Not Be Named. I mean Shade the Changing Man. I mean, there's so many great imaginative stories that take place. Constantine, Hellblazer, Lucifer by M.R. Carey, Mike Carey, who wrote Once Was Willem. So many dark and fantastical and almost fairy tale-esque stories that inhabit the DC universe. A lot of these came about during the 1990s, late 1980s, early 1990s, when Karen Berger was doing a lot over at Vertigo Comics. I think Alan Moore was the progenitor of this with his Saga of the Swamp Thing, where we see Swamp Thing descend into hell. We see this very gothic love story between Abby Arcane and Swamp Thing. If you love Shape of Water, you should absolutely check this out. It's beautiful. And to me, I guess if I wanted to not cheat, I would say the Saga of the Swamp Thing. You have so many amazing stories with devils, ghosts, demons, and they all have something to say. The fantastical creatures are not just freaks of the week. There's, you have a woman who becomes a werewolf and is able to show the subjugation of women over time, especially in our Western culture. And oh man, it's such a beautiful story. In my opinion, it transcends the medium. It's one of the greatest stories ever told, Saga of the Swamp Thing, but also the overall DC Universe fantasy side. Then next up, criminally, I do not have a copy, but my number 3 pick is going to be Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. I'm going to keep going until I succeed or die. Don't think I don't know how this might end. I've known it for years. J.K. Rowling, not the most popular name, for good reason, but I do think her work with the Harry Potter series, I mean, it defined a generation. We all have memories of watching the Harry Potter films, which I think are amazing adaptations. I'm not usually an adaptation guy, but something about the Harry Potter movies and something about the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings films just bring the adaptation love out of me. I love the Harry Potter films. I think they're amazing. I love the books. I think they're amazing. I think the wizarding world of Harry Potter perfectly encapsulates the idea of a magical fantasy world just beyond our own. Absolutely recommend to anyone who yearns for the fantastic. All right, and my number 2 pick is going to be a book series that is not super popular on BookTube, and I do not have a copy, but I grew up on this series. I read it during my freshman year of high school, which is definitely younger than the target audience of this book, might I say. There's a lot I did not pick up on, but my number 2 pick is The Magician's Trilogy by Lev Grossman. For just 1 second, look at your life and see how perfect it is. Stop looking for the next secret door that is going to lead you to your real life. Stop waiting. This is it. There's nothing else. It's here, and you better decide to enjoy it, or you're going to be miserable wherever you go for the rest of your life, forever. This trilogy is raunchy, it's weird, it's dark, but if you grew up on Narnia, if you grew up on Harry Potter, I think the world of Breakables and Fillory and Further is a no-brainer. It's full of literary references. It's full of contemplations on the effects of addiction and how different selective academic programs can make someone feel worthless. The addiction allegory is something that features throughout, especially with Juliet's storyline. Quentin Coldwater is not a very likable character. I think this is where it's going to rub a lot of people the wrong way, but I do think he is the right character for this trilogy. I think this is able to understand young adulthood, adolescence bleeding into young adulthood, and what it feels like to be in your 20s and not really know what your purpose is. I absolutely adore this trilogy. It's not something I can reread frequently just because of how dark the subject matter is, but I did really love this trilogy. I hate the TV show. All right, and my number 1 pick is one of my favorite novels that I've ever read, and that is Jerusalem by Alan Moore. Places don't stay where you left them. You go back there, anywhere, and even if it looks exactly how it did before, it's somewhere else. Each day and every deed's eternal, little boy. Live them in such a way that you can bear to live with them eternally. So Jerusalem is a little bit uncontemporary for this sort of genre because a lot of people might actually think of it as contemporary fiction. But the truth of the matter is there is a 400-page descent into hell right in the middle of this book. And even prior to that and after this section, there are tons of run-ins with angels and demons and different mythical beings that our characters have. This is a multi-POV story. It is not linear at all. In fact, it balks in the face of linearity or lineality or whatever. Did I just spout 2 made-up words? Anyway, it does not try to tell a linear story. It does not try to
frame this narrative within one or two viewpoints. It is a vast story with multi POVs and a lot to say. I absolutely adored this book. I think everyone should read it, despite its massive length, despite being the size of the King James version of the Bible and the collected works of Shakespeare. As someone who's read the collected works of Shakespeare, I think this is more worth a read than the collected works of Shakespeare. And I love Shakespeare, but I think Alan Moore is probably one of the greatest writers to have ever lived. I think a lot of his prose work is overlooked because he is such a famous name within the comics medium. But his prose is divine. It's really good. I think his prose, his actual craft as a writer is something I could only compare to Janny Wirtz, Steven Erikson, John Steinbeck. It's just his ability, his pen game is very strong. Is very strong with this one. And yeah, I think everyone should check out Jerusalem and some of these other books. And please let me know down in the comments below what fantasies you've read that expound on our world and create a magical world just beyond the veil of our world. Because I really, really have a fondness for these type of stories. And anyway, stay safe, guys. Peace.